Hello guys, welcome to Ben 10 What Ifs. So in this video, we will see, what if Ben 10 forged the Astral Omnitrix and got Harem of Gwen, Eunice and Rayona? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Blank, blank, underscore, blank. Chapter 1. Cosmic Blueprints. The ancient Galvan archive chamber hummed with quiet energy as Ben Tennyson's fingers traced the holographic projections floating before him. Motes of dust danced in the pale blue light, lending an ethereal quality to the vast repository of knowledge. At 26, Ben had grown into his role as the wielder of the Omnitrix. With a quiet confidence that replaced the brash impulsiveness of his youth. His shoulders, broader now with maturity, hunched slightly as he leaned forward to examine the schematics that had drawn I am across 3 galaxies to Galvan Prime. Azimuth, you brilliant, paranoid genius, he murmured, his voice low but carrying in the cavernous space. You never stopped creating, did you? The designs for him were unlike anything he'd encountered before, complex, theoretical, and utterly revolutionary. Not just an evolution of the Omnitrix, but something that transcended its limitations entirely. The Astral Omnitrix, Azimuth had called it in his encrypted notes. A device capable of not only transforming its user but manipulating cosmic energy itself, potentially opening gateways between dimensions. Ben's reflection in the holographic display showed a face marked by experience, a thin scar running along his jawline, earned during the Incarsine invasion 3 years prior. Green eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of stars. And the slight furrow between his brows that appeared whenever he was deep in thought. Are you finding everything satisfactory, Ben Tennyson? The high-pitched voice of first thinker Albedo cut through his concentration. Unlike the Albedo from Ben's youth, this version had never betrayed Azimuth, instead becoming his successor after the original creator of the Omnitrix had retreated into seclusion. Ben straightened, his 6-foot frame towering over the diminutive Galvan. More than satisfactory, first thinker. I'm finding the impossible. Albedo's face remained impassive, but his eyes narrowed slightly. Azimuth's theoretical work was often ambitious. This isn't just ambitious, Ben said, manipulating the hologram to expand a particular section of the design. It's revolutionary. The Astral Omnitrix doesn't just transform the user. It creates a quantum link between the wielder and the fundamental cosmic forces. Those designs were never meant to be implemented, Albedo said sharply, his small hands gesturing dismissively. The power requirements alone would be met by interfacing with the celestial sapien DNA already present in the Omnitrix, Ben interrupted, pointing to a series of calculations in the corner of the display. Azimuth figured it out before he disappeared. The question is why he never built it. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken implications. Both knew that Azimuth's brilliance was matched only by his caution. If he had developed a theoretical framework but chosen not to implement it, he must have had compelling reasons. Perhaps, Ben continued, he was waiting for the right time. Or the right wielder. He tapped his Omnitrix meaningfully, the familiar green glow pulsing in response to his touch. Albedo's antennae twitched in what Ben had come to recognize as discomfort. I will remind you that access to these archives was granted as a courtesy, not an invitation to resurrect potentially dangerous technologies. Ben's lips curved into a half-smile. When has danger ever stopped progress, first thinker? Besides, with the anomalies appearing across the galaxy, we might need something beyond conventional capabilities. The mention of the anomalies, mysterious rifts in space-time that had been detected with increasing frequency over the past 6 months, caused Albedo's posture to stiffen. Quote, the plumbers are investigating those incidents, the Galvan said firmly. And they're finding nothing, Ben countered, his voice taking on the authoritative edge that had made species from across the cosmos listen when he spoke. Because they're looking for conventional explanations for an unconventional phenomenon. Ben turned back to the holographic schematics, his mind already racing with possibilities. He had spent the last decade mastering the Omnitrix, understanding its intricacies in ways that had impressed even Azimuth. If anyone could bring the Astral Omnitrix from theory to reality, it would be him. I'll need a team, he said, more to himself than to Albedo. Someone who understands xenotechnology on a fundamental level, not just its applications. Albedo sighed, a sound of resignation that suggested he recognized the futility of arguing with Ben when he had set his mind on something. I suppose Drive Chen is currently on Galvan Prime. Her understanding of interdimensional physics is adequate. Ben raised an eyebrow. From a Galvan, adequate was high praise indeed. Kira Chen, the xenotechnologist who mapped the quantum signature of Legerdemain. The same, Albedo confirmed. She's been consulting on our deep space monitoring systems. I can arrange an introduction, though I maintain my reservations about this project. Noted, Ben said, already downloading the schematics to his personal data crystal. The green light of his Omnitrix reflected off the crystal's facets, creating patterns across the archive walls. And appreciated, but something tells me we don't have the luxury of caution anymore. As if responding to his words, the ground beneath them trembled slightly. Albedo's eyes widened in alarm as the holographic displays flickered. That's the third seismic event this week, the Galvan said, checking a device on his wrist. Completely inconsistent with Galvan Prime's geological stability. Ben's expression darkened as he pocketed the data crystal. Not seismic, cosmic. His voice carried absolute certainty. The fabric of space-time is under strain, and it's getting worse. He looked down at Albedo with determination etched across his features. Arrange that meeting with Dr. Chen. Today, the Galvan Science Institute stood as a testament to the planet's dedication to knowledge, a sprawling complex of crystalline towers and domes that house the greatest collection of scientific minds in the galaxy. Ben moved through its corridors with purpose, his green jacket standing out against the predominantly white and silver interior. Scientists and researchers of various species stopped to watch as he passed, their whispers following in his wake. After all these years, his reputation still preceded him. Hero of the universe, master of the Omnitrix, the human who had saved countless worlds. Ben had learned to tune out both the adulation and the skepticism. Fame was merely a tool, useful for opening doors but ultimately meaningless compared to the work itself. The laboratory he sought occupied an entire wing of the Institute's quantum mechanics division. As the doors slid open with a soft hiss, Ben was greeted by a sight of controlled chaos. Holographic equations floated in the air, shifting and recalculating as parameters changed. Prototype devices in various stages of assembly littered workbenches. And in the center of it all a woman muttering to herself as she manipulated a three-dimensional model of what appeared to be a wormhole. Unstable at the event horizon, compensate with inverse tachyon field, no, that Crete. Cascade failure in the tertiary matrix. Her voice was rapid fire, thoughts flowing directly to speech without filter. Dr. Kira Chen didn't look up as Ben entered, too absorbed in her work to register his presence. She was shorter than Ben by about a foot, with short black hair styled in a practical bob, the front section dyed a vibrant electric blue. Her lab coat bore the patches of at least 5 different scientific institutions. And the sleeve was slightly singed, suggesting a recent experiment gone awry. Ben cleared his throat. Nothing. Dr. Chen, he tried, still focused on her model. She held up one finger in his direction. 30 seconds. Breakthrough or breakdown happening right now. Her hands moved with incredible precision through the holographic interface, making adjustment. NTS with the confidence of someone who understood the laws of physics as intimately as most people understood their own names. Ben waited, taking the opportunity to observe. The lab itself told him much about Kira Chen. Organized despite its apparent chaos, innovative in its setup, with equipment modified and customized rather than used as designed. A mind that refused to be constrained by convention. Ha! Kira exclaimed suddenly as the model stabilized, its erratic energy patterns settling into a harmonious flow. Selective quantum anchoring at 4 points, not 3. So obvious in hindsight. She spun around, triumph written across her features, only to freeze when she realized who stood waiting. You're Ben Tennyson, she stated, blinking rapidly as if recalibrating her entire thought process. Last I checked, Ben replied with a slight smile. And you're Kira Chen, the woman who proved that magic has a quantum signature. Her eyebrows rose slightly. You've read my paper. Most outside specialized fields found it incomprehensible. I had a lot of time during interstellar travel, Ben said, stepping further into the lab. And a personal interest in the intersection of science and what some call magic. Especially after my cousin. He trailed off, an old pain flickering across his face momentarily before he controlled it. This universe's Gwen wasn't his cousin, but The parallel reminded him of what he'd lost. Kira's expression shifted from surprise to curiosity to understanding in rapid succession. The Anodite incident. That was your Gwen, wasn't it? I'm sorry. Ben appreciated that she didn't offer empty platitudes. It was 5 years ago. But it's partly why I'm here now. He reached into his pocket and produced the data crystal. I need someone who understands both the science and the less conventional aspects of reality. Curiosity won out over decorum as Kira stepped forward. May I? She asked, gesturing to the crystal. Ben handed it to her. Watch. Hing as she slotted it into her workstation. The holographic displays immediately shifted, Azimuth's designs for the Astral Omnitrix expanding to fill the laboratory space. Equations and schematics hovered in the air, rotating slowly to reveal their complexity from all angles. Kira's eyes widened, her lips parting in silent appreciation as she took in the designs. This is, elegant doesn't begin to cover it. It's beautiful. Her fingers traced the air, following particularly complex calculations. Whoever designed this was thinking 10 dimensions ahead of everyone else. Azimuth, Ben said simply. Kira's head snapped toward him. The Azimuth, creator of the Omnitrix. Ben nodded, tapping the device on his wrist. The very same. He called it the Astral Omnitrix. From what I can tell, it doesn't just transform the user. It establishes a link with the fundamental forces that bind dimensions together. Allowing manipulation of cosmic energy at its source, Kira continued, her mind clearly racing ahead. You could potentially create bridges between realities, stabilize dimensional boundaries, even. She paused, her expression suddenly serious. You could tear those boundaries down completely. Which is why I need to build it, Ben said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had made difficult decisions before and would again. Something is already weakening those boundaries. The anomalies. The quantum fluctuations appearing across the galaxy, Kira interrupted, her excitement visibly building. They're not random, are they? They're symptoms of a larger problem. Ben felt a rush of validation. This was exactly why he needed someone like Kira, someone who could make the same cognitive leaps he had. Exactly. And conventional technology isn't equipped to address dimensional instability on this scale. Kira was already turning back to the designs, her fingers moving rapidly as she expanded sections, examined power flows, and analyzed material requirements. Building this would be challenging, doesn't cover it, revolutionary, possibly insane. She looked back at him, a spark of determination in her eyes. When do we start? Before Ben could answer, an alarm sounded throughout the institute, 3 short bursts followed by a sustained tone that made his skin crawl. The Omnitrix on his wrist flashed in response, its green glow intensifying. What's that? Kira asked, instantly alert. Dimensional breach, Ben replied, already moving toward the door. Bigger than any we've recorded so far. You wanted to start. We just did. The Institute's central Plaza had transformed from a serene gathering place to ground zero of chaos in minutes. A rift hung suspended in the air, a jagged tear in reality that pulsed with energies in colors Ben couldn't name. ISTS ran for cover as security drones established a perimeter, their weapons trained on the anomaly. Ben assessed the situation with the practiced eye of someone who had faced countless crises. The rift was growing, expanding outward in irregular bursts. Each expansion sent tremors through the ground and ripples through the air that distorted light and sound. Everyone back, he ordered, his voice cutting through the panic. Years of command lent his words authority that even the Galvan security forces respected, the small aliens immediately widening their perimeter. Kira appeared at his side, a hastily assembled scanner in her hands. The quantum signature is unlike anything I've seen, she said, her voice steady despite the crisis. Multiple frequency layers, as if several dimensions are overlapping at once. Ben's hand hovered over the Omnitrix. Any hostile intent readings? Not exactly hostile, but definitely directed, Kira replied, adjusting her scanner. This isn't a natural occurrence. Something, or someone, is forcing this breach open from the other side. As if confirming her analysis, the rift suddenly stabilized, its edges smoothing into a perfect oval. The chaotic energies coalesced into a swirling portal, and through it stepped a figure that made Ben's combat instincts fire on all cylinders. Humanoid but clearly not human, the being stood 7 feet tall with skin that seemed to shift colors with every movement. Its eyes glowed with the same unnameable energies as the rift, and it wore armor that appeared to be made of crystallized time itself, capturing moments in its facets like insects in amber. At last, it spoke, its voice echoing as if coming from multiple sources simultaneously. The Prime Universe, the nexus of all realities. Ben stepped forward, placing himself between the being and everyone else. Identify yourself and state your purpose, he demanded, his finger already on the Omnitrix dial. The being's gaze settled on Ben, recognition flaring in those otherworldly eyes. The wielder of the Omnitrix. Your reputation extends even beyond dimensional boundaries, Ben Tennyson. It made a gesture that might have been meant as respectful. I am Kronos, observer of the infinite. I have come to witness the convergence. Convergence. Ben repeated, not relaxing his stance. Experience had taught him that beings who spoke in cryptic pronouncements rarely brought good news. Kronos swept an arm through the air, leaving trails of energy that formed into images, galaxies colliding, planets overlapping, realities bleeding into one another. The walls between dimensions grow thin. Soon, all will be one. All must be one. It is inevitable. Kira stepped forward, her scientific curiosity temporarily overriding caution. You're talking about dimensional collapse. That's not inevitable, it's catastrophic. The being's expression shifted to something like pity. Perspective, drive, Chen, is everything. From the cosmic scale, the merging of all realities is simply the next stage of universal evolution. Ben noted with concern that Kronos knew Kira's name without introduction. And I suppose you're here to help this evolution along? He asked, the pieces falling into place. The anomalies we've been detecting, that's your doing. Kronos inclined his head. I merely accelerate what has already begun. The cosmic tides cannot be reversed, only channeled. Ben had heard similar rhetoric from would-be destroyers of worlds before. Behind the philosophical veneer lay the same disregard for life and choice that characterized every cosmic-level threat he'd faced. Here's my perspective, Ben said, his voice hardening as he activated the Omnitrix. The familiar green light washed over him as he selected his form. Life finds a way, even against cosmic tides. In a flash of emerald energy, Ben transformed. Where he had stood now towered Atomics, one of his most powerful alien forms. Nuclear energy pulsed beneath his armored exterior, ca. Sting the plaza in a radioactive green glow. Ha-mi-na ha-mi-na ha-mi-na. Atomics' booming voice echoed across the plaza as he channeled energy between his hands. Cosmic ray. The blast of concentrated nuclear energy shot toward Kronos with devastating speed. The dimensional being made no move to dodge, instead raising a single hand. The energy beam struck an invisible barrier inches from his palm and dissipated into harmless particles. Impressive, Kronos commented, seemingly genuinely appreciative. Few beings can channel energy with such precision. But conventional force, even nuclear, cannot affect one who exists partially outside your dimensional constraints. As if to demonstrate, Kronos flickered, his form becoming momentarily transparent before solidifying again. He raised both arms, and the rift behind him pulsed in response. From its depths emerged floating orbs of the same unnameable energy, each about the size of a baseball. Perhaps a demonstration of cosmic perspective is in order, Kronos said as the orbs spread out across the plaza. These dimensional anchors will accelerate the local convergence process. Observe what awaits your universe, wielder. The orbs began to pulse in unison, each one creating a small rift in the air around it. Through these tears in reality, Ben could see glimpses of other dimensions, versions of Galvan Prime that were subtly or dramatically different. In one, the buildings were made of living crystal, in another, the sky burned with perpetual fire. Stop this now, Ben demanded, preparing another energy attack despite its previous ineffectiveness. I am merely the harbinger, not the cause, Kronos replied calmly. But since you insist on resistance rather than acceptance, I will withdraw, for now. The anchors remain, however. Consider them a gift, a glimpse of the inevitable. Before Ben could respond, Kronos stepped backward into his rift. We will meet again, Ben Tennyson. When you have had time to witness the truth of convergence. When you have begun to create that which might actually affect the cosmic balance. His glowing eyes fixed on Ben's Omnitrix meaningfully. The Astral Omnitrix calls to you for a reason. Heed its call, but understand its true purpose. With those cryptic words, Kronos vanished, the rift sealing behind him with a thunderclap that shattered windows throughout the plaza. The dimensional anchors remained, however, each one continuing to create small tears in the fabric of reality. Ben reverted to his human form in a flash of green light, immediately turning to Kira. We nay, Ed to contain those things before they tear Galvan Prime apart. Kira was already scanning the nearest anchor, her brow furrowed in concentration. They're creating stable micro-rifts, each one connected to a different parallel dimension. The quantum signature is shifting constantly, making them virtually impossible to nullify with conventional technology. Then we go unconventional, a new voice announced from behind them. Ben turned to see a figure floating several feet above the ground, surrounded by a nimbus of pulsing magenta energy. A woman with fiery red hair and glowing pink eyes, wearing a blue uniform bearing the insignia of the Plumbers, the intergalactic peacekeeping force that Ben had worked with for years. Unlike the Gwen he had grown up with, this woman was a stranger to him, yet hauntingly familiar. The same determined set to her jaw, the same intelligence behind her eyes, but without the shared history that had defined his relationship with his cousin. Gwendolyn Tennyson, Plumber Special Operations. She introduced herself crisply, descending to the ground with graceful control of her powers. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she looked at Ben. Though I suspect you already know that. Based on your expression. Ben composed himself quickly. Your reputation precedes you. I'm Ben Tennyson, wielder of the Omnitrix, she finished for him. Your reputation does more than precede you. It arrives with fanfare and fireworks. There was a hint of something in her voice. Not quite disdain, but definitely skepticism. Now, about these anomalies. Ben appreciated her focus on the immediate threat. They're dimensional anchors, created by a being calling itself Kronos. Each one is generating a stable connection to another reality. Gwen's hands began to glow bright. As she extended her senses toward the nearest anchor. I can feel it. The magical signature is similar to interdimensional portals I've encountered before, but with a technological component I don't recognize. Hybrid tech magic, Kira supplied, stepping forward with her scanner. Dr. Kira Chen, xenotechnologist. The anchors are using quantum entanglement to maintain stability, but they're read by energy that reads similar to what you're channeling right now. Gwen gave Kira an appraising look, clearly reassessing her initial impression. Anodite energy, she confirmed. Or something closely related. I can disrupt it temporarily, but permanent containment will require something more substantial. Ben's mind raced through possibilities. Can you create a containment field to isolate Hem while we work on a permanent solution? Gwen nodded, already beginning to trace complex patterns in the air with her glowing hands. I can create a mana barrier that should hold for about 12 hours. After that, the dimensional pressure will become too great. 12 hours to save reality. No pressure, Kira muttered, though Ben caught the excitement beneath her concern. As Gwen worked on containing the anchors, Ben pulled Kira aside. The Astral Omnitrix. How quickly can we create a working prototype? Kira's eyes widened. A prototype. From those theoretical designs, even with Galvan technology, we'd need weeks. Maybe months. We have hours, Ben cut in. And based on what Kronos said, the Astral Omnitrix may be the only thing capable of affecting him and his technology. Because it operates on the same principles. Kira realized, her mind visibly shifting into high gear. Creating links between dimensions, manipulating cosmic energy at its source, theoretically, it could counter these anchors by stabilizing the dimensional boundaries instead of weakening them. Ben nodded. Exactly. But we need to move fast. He glanced over at Gwen, who had successfully encased the anchors in translucent pink bubbles of energy. And I think we just found our third team member. Gwen approached them as the last containment field stabilized, perspiration beading on her forehead from the effort. Whatever you're planning, it had better be good. Those fields won't hold forever, and my scans indicate similar anomalies appearing across the galaxy. We have a potential solution, Ben said, nodding to Kira to explain the technical aspects. Kira activated her holoprojector, displaying a simplified version of the Astral Omnitrix schematics. We've discovered designs for a device that could potentially stabilize the dimensional boundaries by creating a controlled interface between realities. Gwen studied the hologram with obvious intelligence, her eyes narrowing as she processed the implications. This looks like it requires an enormous power source. It does, Ben confirmed. That's where your expertise comes in. The power requirements include channeling what Azimuth called cosmic mana, essentially the magical energy that flows between dimensions. Convenient that you happen to need an anodite, Gwen remarked, her tone skeptical. And why exactly should I trust that this device won't make things worse? For all I know, creating it could be exactly what this Chronos character wants. It was a fair question, and one that Ben had already considered. He knew about the Astral Omnitrix, but he seemed concerned that I might build it. That suggests it's a threat to his plans, not part of them. Gwen considered this, then nodded slowly. Logical, but not conclusive. Still, containment is failing faster than anticipated, and the plumbers don't have any better options at the moment. She fixed Ben with an intense gaze. I'll help you, but understand this, if at any point I determine this project threatens universal stability more than it helps, I'm shutting it down. Permanently. The underlying threat was clear, but Ben merely nodded. I wouldn't expect anything less. He extended his hand. Welcome to the team, Gwendolyn. After a moment's hesitation, she took his hand. Just Gwen is fine. Now, where do we start? The next 10 hours passed in a blur of concentrated activity. Albedo, despite his reservations, had granted them access to a secure laboratory in the deepest level of the Galvan Science Institute. Resources were allocated, specialized equipment was assembled, and the theoretical framework of the Astral Omnitrix began to take physical form. Ben worked tirelessly alongside Kira and Gwen, each contributing their unique expertise to the project. Kira's understanding of xenotechnology allowed them to adapt Azimuth's designs to available materials. Gwen's mastery of magical energies provided insights into the cosmic mana conduits that would power the device. And Ben's intimate knowledge of the original Omnitrix guided the integration of its core technology with the new systems. As the hours wore on, Ben noticed the dynamic between three of them shifting from professional cooperation to something more fluid and harmonious. Kira's initial scientific detachment gave way to enthusiastic collaboration, her mind working in perfect synchronization with his own when solving technical problems. Gwen's skepticism gradually transformed into reluctant respect, particularly after witnessing Ben's willingness to test potentially dangerous prototypes on himself rather than risk anyone else's safety. The quantum flux capacitor is refusing to stabilize, Kira reported, frustration evident in her voice as she examined the partially assembled device on the workbench before them. Every time we initiate the dimensional scanning sequence, the energy feedback overwhelms the containment field. Gwen leaned over the workbench, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Fatigue visible in the shadows under her eyes. The mana flow patterns are correct, but something's disrupting the harmonic resonance. Ben studied the holographic diagnostic display, his expression thoughtful. What if we're approaching this from the wrong angle? He suggested. Azimuth's designs assume a clean dimensional boundary to work with, but Chronos has already begun the convergence process. Quote, so instead of trying to create perfect isolation between dimensions, Kira began, catching on to his train of thought. We designed the Astral Omnitrix to work within the existing disruption. Ben finished. Adaptation instead of opposition. Gwen nodded slowly, like redirecting a river instead of trying to dam it. Magically speaking, that's actually much more sustainable. As they recalibrated their approach, an alert sounded from the monitoring station they had established to track the dimensional anchors. The holographic display showed that the containment fields were deteriorating at an accelerated rate, with two already beginning to fail. We're running out of time, Gwen said, moving to reinforce the fields with a fresh surge of mana. The effort was visibly taxing, her hands trembling slightly as she channeled the energy. I can buy us maybe another hour, but after that, we'll be ready, Ben stated with a certainty he didn't entirely feel. He turned back to the prototype on the workbench. The device resembled the Omnitrix in its basic form, but with significant modifications. The casing was crafted from a rare alloy that could withstand interdimensional energies. The core contained elements of chronosapian technology, allowing for manipulation of temporal fields. And throughout the device ran conduits designed to channel and direct cosmic mana. Final integration sequence, Kira announced, making the last adjustments to the device's internal mechanisms. Ben, we need the Omnitrix to complete the synchronization. Ben extended his arm, positioning his Omnitrix adjacent to the prototype. Ready when you are. Kira initiated the sequence, and a stream of data began flowing from the original Omnitrix to its astral counterpart. The prototype hummed to life, its surface glowing with a pattern that shifted between green and blue. DNA templates transferring successfully, Kira reported, monitoring the process. Alien transformation capabilities intact, dimensional interface activating, now. The prototype pulsed once, twice, then emitted a soft chime that indicated completion. The three of them stared at the finish. Astral Omnitrix with a mixture of triumph and trepidation. It's done, Kira said, her voice hushed with disbelief. We actually did it. Theoretically done, Gwen corrected. We haven't tested it yet. And we have no idea if it will actually work against the dimensional anchors. Ben reached for the device, his expression resolute. Only one way to find out. Before either of them could object, he removed his original Omnitrix, a process that had become much simpler over the years as the device evolved to recognize his intentions, and attached the Astral Omnitrix to his wrist. The moment it made contact with his skin, Ben felt a surge of energy unlike anything he had experienced before. The Astral Omnitrix seemed to meld with his very being, creating connections that went beyond physical contact. His awareness expanded, stretching outward to encompass not just the laboratory, but layers of reality beyond it. Ghostly impressions of alternate versions of the room overlapped with his perception. As if he were viewing multiple dimensions simultaneously. Ben, Kira's voice sounded distant, though she stood right beside him. Are you okay? With effort, Ben focused his perception back to the primary dimension. I'm fine, he assured her, though, fine, hardly captured the sensation of having his consciousness stretched across multiple realities. It's incredible. I can sense the dimensional boundaries. Feel where they're weakening. Gwen studied him with professional concern, her eyes glowing slightly as she assessed his condition. Your aura has changed. It's resonating on multiple frequencies simultaneously. She hesitated, then added with reluctant admiration, it's actually stabilizing the local dimensional field just by existing. Before they could discuss the implications further, a violent tremor shook the laboratory. Equipment crashed to the floor as the lights flickered ominously. The containment fields are collapsing, Kira exclaimed, checking the monitoring station. All of them, simultaneously. Another tremor, stronger than the first, nearly knocked them off their feet. The very air seemed to ripple, reality itself protesting the strain being placed upon it. We need to get to the anchors now, Ben said, already moving toward the door. If they all fail at once, the resulting dimensional cascade could tear Galvan Prime apart. They raced through the institute, passing panicked scientists and security personnel rushing in all directions. When they reached the central plaza, the situation was even worse than Ben had feared. The containment fields had failed completely, and the dimensional anchors were now generating rifts large enough for beings to pass through. Creatures and objects from other dimensions were already beginning to emerge, some merely confused. Others actively hostile. A squad of plumbers was attempting to maintain order, led by a tall, muscular female tetraman whose forearms wielded energy weapons with practiced skill. Her red skin bore the traditional markings of Koro's nobility, and her black hair was pulled back in a warrior's braid. Ambassador Rayona, Gwen called out, recognition in her voice. The situation. The tetraman turned, acknowledging Gwen with a quick nod. Deteriorating rapidly, Agent Tennyson. The rifts are expanding beyond our containment capabilities, and we have reports of similar breaches occurring across the planet. Ben stepped forward, the Astral Omnitrix glowing on his wrist. I may have a solution. Clear the area as much as possible. Rayona assessed Ben with a warrior's eye, noting the unfamiliar device on his wrist. You must be the famous Ben Tennyson. She barked orders to her squad without waiting for confirmation, directing them to establish a wider perimeter. Whatever you're planning, make it quick. The structural integrity of this entire sector is beginning to fail. Ben moved to the center of the plaza, where the dimensional anchors hovered, each generating its own rift into another reality. He could feel the Astral Omnitrix responding to their presence, resonating with the same cosmic energy that powered them. "What's the plan?" Kira asked, staying close despite the danger. "The Astral Omnitrix can interface with the anchors," Ben explained, raising his arm toward the nearest one. "In theory, I can reverse their polarity, turn them from convergence points to dimensional stabilizers." "In theory," Gwen repeated, preparing her own magical defenses. "And if the theory is wrong?" Ben gave her a lopsided smile that carried echoes of his younger, more carefree self. "Then we move to Plan B." "Which is?" Rayona asked, joining them with weapons ready. "I haven't figured that part out yet," Ben admitted. "Let's hope Plan A works." Before anyone could respond, he activated the Astral Omnitrix. The device emitted a pulse of energy that expanded outward in concentric rings of blue-green light. As it reached each dimensional anchor, the anchors, erratic pulsing, slowed. Then synchronized with the Omnitrix's energy signature. Ben felt the connection establish, a direct link between his consciousness, the Astral Omnitrix, and the network of anchors. Through this link, he could sense Kronos' influence, the subtle manipulation that had turned what should have been neutral dimensional markers into tools of convergence. With careful mental precision, Ben began to realign the anchors, quantum matrices, reversing the polarity of their dimensional interaction. It was delicate work, like disarming a bomb while blindfolded, using only his newfound awe. Renis of cosmic energy flows to guide him. The rifts began to contract, slowly at first, then more rapidly as the process gained momentum. The chaotic energies that had been tearing at the fabric of reality now flowed in controlled patterns, reinforcing dimensional boundaries instead of weakening them. "It's working," Kira breathed, watching as her scanner confirmed what they could all see. "The dimensional stability index is rising across the board." Ben maintained his focus, sweat beading on his forehead as he channeled more power through the Astral Omnitrix. The device grew warm against his skin, then hot, approaching the limits of what it could safely process. Just as the last rift was about to seal, a surge of counter-energy erupted from the network of anchors. Ben staggered as the feedback crashed through the connection, his mind momentarily overwhelmed by the assault. "He's fighting back," Ben gasped, struggling to maintain control. "Kronos is trying to reassert his influence over the anchors." Gwen moved without hesitation, placing her hands on Ben's shoulders from behind. "Channel it through me," she instructed. "I can help stabilize the energy flow." Ben felt Gwen's I intertwine with the Astral Omnitrix's energy field, creating a more resilient connection. The counter-pressure from Kronos' intervention began to subside as Gwen helped distribute and absorb the excess energy. "We need more power to complete the realignment," Ben said through gritted teeth. "The anchors are still partially under his control." "Allow me to assist," Rayona said, stepping forward, to place one of her 4 hands on the Astral Omnitrix itself. Tetraman warriors are trained to channel energy through physical contact. The additional connection strengthened the link further, Rayona's physical prowess providing a grounding force that stabilized the wildly fluctuating energies. "One more push," Ben urged, drawing on reserves of willpower honed through years of facing impossible odds. Everyone together. Kira completed their circle, placing her hand over Ben's and the Astral Omnitrix. As a human without energy manipulation abilities, she couldn't contribute power directly. But her scientific understanding of the device helped refine its output, making each pulse more efficient. United in purpose, the 4 of them channeled their combined strength through the Astral Omnitrix. A final surge of power washed over the dimensional anchors, completely overriding Kronos' influence and replacing it with the stabilizing pattern Ben had designed. The rifts sealed with a sound like distant thunder, the anchors themselves transforming from chaotic energy constructs into crystalline structures that pulsed with a steady, harmonious rhythm. Where they had once torn at reality, they now reinforced it, creating points of dimensional stability throughout the plaza. Ben lowered his arm, his legs nearly buckling from exhaustion. Rayona caught him with 2 of her arms, her strength easily supporting his weight. "Impressive," the Tetraman ambassador said, genuine respect in her voice. Few beings could have achieved such control on their first attempt. "Not just him," Hera pointed out, looking at each of them in turn. It took all of us working together. Gwen nodded, a hint of a smile softening her usually serious expression. A fortunate combination of skills and abilities. Ben straightened, regaining his composure as he examined the transformed anchors. We've stabilized these, but Kronos has likely placed others throughout the galaxy. And he won't stop trying to bring about this convergence he believes is inevitable. Then we continue, Gwen said with determination. The plumbers have been tracking these anomalies for months. With the Astral Omnitrix, we now have a means to address them. I will inform the Tetraman High Council, Rayona added. If dimensional stability is threatened, Koros will stand ready to assist. Our warriors may lack scientific knowledge, but our strength and resolve are unquestionable. Ben looked at the three women who had helped him achieve what should have been impossible. Hera with her brilliant scientific mind, Gwen with her mastery of magical energies, and Rayona with her warrior's strength and honor. Each brought something unique and essential to the challenge they faced. Then it seems we have a team, he said. A feeling of rightness settling over him. The Astral Omnitrix glowed softly on his wrist, as if in agreement. And not a moment too soon. Something tells me Kronos was just getting started. In the distance, beyond Galvan Prime's crystalline skyline, the stars seemed to shimmer and shift, hints of other realities bleeding through the thinning veil between dimensions. The Astral Omnitrix had proven itself. But the greater challenge, the battle for the stability of all reality, was only beginning. As if responding to his thoughts, the device pulsed once with a light that contained all the colors of creation. Ben Tennyson, wielder of the Astral Omnitrix, stood ready to face whatever came next, not alone, but with allies whose diverse strengths complemented his own. Together, they would defend the boundaries between worlds, and perhaps discover why those boundaries existed in the first place. Chapter 2. Dimensional Rifts. Starlight twisted through prism glass windows, casting fractured rainbows across the Galvan Control Center where Ben hunched over holographic displays. 3 days since Kronos' appearance, and already the dimensional anchors had spread to 17 worlds across 3 galaxies. The transformed anchors on Galvan Prime maintained stability, but their influence extended only so far. Incoming transmission from Plumber Headquarters, announced a technician, her voice clipped with professional urgency. Ben straightened, rolling tension from his shoulders. Sleep had become a luxury he couldn't afford. The Astral Omnitrix pulsed against his wrist, less foreign now, almost sympathetic to his fatigue. Put it through, he replied. The central display shimmered, resolving into the stern visage of Magister Patellidae. The Piscis Volan's fishy features looked even more drawn than Ben felt. Tennyson. Patellidae began without preamble. We've got another cluster forming in the Andromeda Galaxy. Dozens of micro-rifts surrounding Pyros. Hera's fingers flew across her console, pulling up sensor data. The blue streak in her hair had faded slightly over the sleepless days, but her eyes remained sharp, analytical. Pattern matches previous formations. Looks Lee. K. Kronos is targeting volatile worlds, planets with naturally unstable cores. Smart strategy, Ben muttered. Dimensional rifts near unstable planetary cores would create cascade reactions, potentially shattering entire star systems. Rayona completed his thought, stepping into the control center. The Tetraman ambassador had traded her formal diplomatic attire for battle armor that gleamed dully under the control room lights. 4 arms crossed over her chest as she studied the display. My warriors stand ready to assist, Ben Tennyson. Ben acknowledged her with a grateful nod. Their working relationship had evolved rapidly over the past 3 days, mutual respect blossoming into something like friendship. Rayona approached every challenge with the directness characteristic of her species, but tempered with a diplomat's strategic mind. Her presence brought stability to their hastily assembled team. We appreciate Chorus's support, Ben replied, but Pyros presents unique challenges. The atmospheric temperature alone would prove fatal to most species, Gwen interrupted, entering with a data tablet in hand. Unlike the others, she appeared rested, her practical efficiency extending to self-care. But not to a Pyronite. Ben glanced at the Astral Omnitrix. Heat Blast could handle the conditions, but the transformation time limit complicates things. These operations take hours. Hera's eyes widened with sudden realization. Wait, The Astral Omnitrix doesn't necessarily have the same limitations as the original. According to Azimuth's designs, the quantum entanglement matrix X could potentially extend transformation duration indefinitely. Theoretically, Ben emphasized, recalling their previous, theoretical, solutions and their sometimes explosive results. Theory becomes practice through testing. Rayona stated flatly, "You cannot know without attempting." Ben suppressed a smile. Tetraman directness had its advantages. Fair point. But we're still learning this device's capabilities. The interdimensional aspects especially. A sharp alarm cut through their discussion. Not the standard alert tone, but a shrill, pulsating wail that indicated a dimensional breach. "Right here, right now. Breach in Sector 7, called the Galvan technician, voice rising an octave. Energy signature unlike previous rifts. It's stable. Location." Ben demanded, already moving toward the door. "Science Wing, Laboratory 3. Ben exchanged glances with his team. "That's where we built the Astral Omnitrix." "Could be coincidence," Kira offered, falling into step beside him. "Not likely," Gwen countered. Hands already glowing with mana in preparation. Rayona drew twin energy blades from sheaths on her back. Coincidences are for those with insufficient information. They moved through the Institute corridors with practiced coordination, each taking position without needing direction. 3 days of crisis response had forged them into something more cohesive than mere allies. Laboratory 3's reinforced doors stood partially open, spilling unnatural light into the hallway. Not the blue-green of the rifts they'd encountered before, but a pure, almost blinding white. Ben raised the Astral Omnitrix, cycling through alien forms. "Ready." 3 nods answered him. "Going XLR8, he announced, slapping down the dial. Energy washed over him, reshaping his human form into the sleek, velociraptor-like alien with wheel-shaped feet and a streamlined helmet. "I'll scout you." Before he could finish, a figure stumbled through the laboratory doors, humanoid, female. With short blonde hair and wearing what appeared to be a white and green jumpsuit. She braced herself against the doorframe, visibly disoriented. "Help," she gasped, looking up to reveal familiar green eyes. "The rifts are collapsing. Entire dimensions." "I had to." Recognition struck Ben like a physical blow. "Eunice." The woman focused on him, confusion giving way to shock. "Ben." Her gaze moved to the others. Then back to the Astral Omnitrix on his wrist. "You've already built it. Thank the creators, there's still time." Ben reverted to human form in a flash of green light. "Time for what? How are you here?" "The Eunice I knew was a Omnitrix." "Yes." She straightened, composing herself with visible effort. "I am her. Or rather, another version of her. From a dimension where the convergence has already begun in earnest." Quote. Gwen stepped forward, her mana-wreathed hands casting magenta shadows across the corridor. "Prove you're who you claim to be." Eunice nodded, understanding the caution. "Scan me." The Omnitrix genetic structure is distinctive, even across dimensional barriers. Gwen's eyes narrowed as she extended her senses, the glow around her hands intensifying momentarily. She's telling the truth, at least about being a Omnitrix. Her energy signature is complex, layered, because of absorbed genetic material from thousands of species across multiple dimensions, Eunice explained. It was necessary for survival. Kira had pulled out her scanner, fascination overriding caution. "The quantum resonance in her cellular structure is unlike anything I've recorded. It's like she exists in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. A useful adaptation when reality itself becomes unstable," Eunice said, her voice steadying. "But we don't have time for extended explanations. The dimensional breach I used to travel here won't remain stable for long, and I brought critical data." Ben made a quick decision. "Lab 3 is compromised. Let's move to the secure briefing room." He turned to the Galvan technician who had followed them. "Seal this section and establish a quantum containment field around the breach." The technician nodded and hurried away to comply. "Can you walk?" Ben asked Eunice, noting her unsteady stance. "Dimensional travel takes a toll, but I'll manage." She took a step forward, then stumbled. Rayona moved with surprising speed for her size, catching Eunice with 2 arms while keeping her weapons ready in the others. "I will assist," the Tetraman stated, not as an offer but as a fact. "Conserve your strength for information sharing." Something flickered across Eunice's face. surprise, perhaps appreciation, before she nodded. "Thank you, Ambassador Rayona." Rayona's eyes widened slightly. "You know me. In my dimension, we fought together against the Convergence." Eunice's expression darkened. "Until Koros fell." The words hung in the air like physical things, heavy with implication. Rayona's jaw tightened, but she said nothing as they made their way to the briefing room. Holographic displays illuminated the secure space, casting everyone in sterile blue light. Eunice stood at the center of the room, steadier now, her ideal disorientation replaced by focused urgency. The others formed a semicircle around her, Ben leaning against the central table, Gwen standing with arms crossed, Kira perched on a stool with her scanner, and Rayona standing sentinel-like near the door. "In my dimension," Eunice began, "the Convergence began exactly as it has here. Isolated rifts, dimensional anchors, Chronos appearing as harbinger rather than cause." "You encountered Chronos as well?" Ben asked. "Yes, though we learned too late that he is merely an aspect of something larger." Eunice touched a small device on her wrist, CTing a complex interdimensional map into the center of the room. "We called it the Convergence Cascade, a self-perpetuating collapse of dimensional boundaries that begins slowly but accelerates exponentially once critical mass is reached." Kira leaned forward, eyes widening. "The mathematics are beautiful," she murmured, then flushed when everyone looked at her. "Terrifying, but beautiful. The way the collapse propagates follows a perfect Fibonacci sequence across dimensional planes." "Precisely," Eunice nodded, "which is why we initially believed it to be a natural cosmic event. By the time we realized it was engineered, dozens of dimensions had already merged or been destroyed entirely." "Engineered by whom?" Gwen asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Eunice's expression grew solemn. "We called it the Timeless One, an entity that exists outside conventional reality, feeding on the energy released during dimensional collapse." "And Chronos serves this entity?" Ben asked. "Chronos is the Timeless One, in a sense." Eunice adjusted her projection, showing a fragmented being existing across multiple reality planes. "It can't fully manifest in any single dimension, so it creates aspects, Chronos being just one, to prepare realities for convergence." Rayona stepped closer, studying the projection with narrowed eyes. "If this entity exists outside conventional reality, how can it be opposed?" Eunice turned to Ben, her gaze settling on the Astral Omnitrix. "With that, in my dimension, Azimuth theorized that the Astral Omnitrix could create a stable matrix across dimensional boundaries, essentially vaccinating reality against collapse. But you didn't complete it in time," Ben guessed, the weight of responsibility settling heavier on his shoulders. "We came close." Eunice's voice carried the hollow echo of devastating loss. "But the Galvan homeworld fell before final testing. Azimuth didn't survive." Silence filled the room, broken only by the soft hum of holographic projectors. Ben looked down at the Astral Omnitrix, its blue-green glow somehow both reassuring and ominous. They had succeeded where Eunice's dimension had failed, but only the first step of many. "The dimensional coordinates where breaches occurred in your reality," Kira said suddenly. "Do you have that data? We could potentially predict where Chronos will strike next." "Better than that." Eunice tapped her wrist device again. "I have the complete convergence pattern from my dimension. Assuming the Timeless One follows the same methodology here, we can anticipate the next 87 breach points with 92% accuracy." Kira practically vibrated with excitement. That's incredible. With that kind of predictive model, we could deploy countermeasures before breaches even occur." "Theoretically," Gwen cautioned, echoing Ben's earlier skepticism. "Assuming this dimension follows the same pattern as Eunice's. There will be variations," Eunice acknowledged, "but the fundamental thematics of dimensional collapse remain constant across the multiverse. The sequence may differ in specifics, but not in structure." Ben pushed himself away from the table, decision made. "Kira, work with Eunice to integrate her predictive model with our monitoring systems. Gwen, contact Plumber HQ, we need to establish response teams at each potential breach point." He turned to Rayona. "How quick? Kaylee can Tetraman forces deploy to strategic locations?" "Our warships stand ready," she replied without hesitation. "Once coordinates are provided, deployment can begin within 3 planetary rotations." Make it too, Ben said. Not as a challenge but as a necessity. According to Eunice's data, we don't have much time before the cascade accelerates. Rayona nodded, acceptance in her four-eyed gaze. 2 rotations. As the others moved to their tasks, Ben approached Eunice, lowering his voice. There's more you haven't told us. It wasn't a question. Eunice met his gaze steadily, recognition passing between them, the understanding that comes from sharing experiences across dimensional boundaries. Different circumstances, but the same core. Yes, she admitted quietly. But some knowledge is better shared when necessary. Not before. That's not your decision to make, Ben countered, though without heat. We're facing something that destroyed your entire dimension. We need all the information we can get. Eunice glanced at the others, then back to Ben. The Astral Omnitrix is more powerful than you realize. In my dimension, Azimuth believed it could not only stabilize dimensional boundaries but potentially create new ones, reshape reality itself. Ben's eyes widened slightly. That kind of power is exactly what the Timeless One fears, Eunice finished. Why do you think it accelerated its plans once you created the device? You've become the primary threat to its existence. Ben looked down at the Astral Omnitrix, seeing it in a new light. Not just a tool for transformation or even dimensional stabilization, but something capable of altering the very fabric of the multiverse. I need to understand exactly what this device can do, he said with quiet determination. All of it, Eunice nodded. I'll help you. But Ben, her expression softened with something like sympathy. In my dimension, the price of that knowledge was high. Before he could ask what she meant, Kira called from across the room. Ben, the predictive model is showing imminent breach activity in the Andromeda Galaxy, not just Pyros, but the entire Pyronite stellar cluster. The moment of revelation passed as duty called. Ben moved toward the displays, Eunice beside him, the weight of untold knowledge hanging between them like an unsprung trap. The command deck of the plumber vessel Celestial Guardian hummed with activity as it dropped out of hyperspace near the Pyronite home system. Massive view screens displayed the fiery orange expanse of Pyros and its neighboring worlds, their surfaces churning with volcanic activity visible even from orbit. Ben stood at the central platform, the Astral Omnitrix casting subtle patterns across the navigation displays. Around him, his core team had expanded to include specialized plumber units and representatives from a dozen worlds, all briefed on the dimensional threat, all prepared for the unprecedented. Sensors detecting quantum fluctuations throughout the system, reported a Galvan technician, predicted breach points matching with 89% accuracy to Eunice's model. Timeline, Ben asked, studying the tactical display. First breaches expected within 20 standard minutes. Kira replied from her station. She'd adapted quickly to the plumber vessel's systems, integrating her own specialized equipment with practiced efficiency. Gravitational stressors already affecting Pyros' core stability. Ben nodded, turning to where Gwen and Eunice monitored the dimensional mapping station. Status of the stabilization array. Calibrated and ready for deployment, Gwen answered. But Ben, the scale of these breaches will require more than just technology. The magical component will need to be channeled through the Astral Omnitrix, Eunice completed. As we discussed, the mana conduits are prepared. Ben felt the attention of the command deck shift to him. This mission would test the full capabilities of the Astral Omnitrix for the first time. Capabilities they still didn't fully understand. The uncertainty in the air was palpable, mixing with determination and the faint edge of fear. Tetraman vessels approaching, announced the communications officer. Ambassador Rayona requests permission to coordinate with our deployment. Granted, Ben replied. Open a channel. The central viewscreen shifted to show Rayona on the bridge of her command ship. The contrast between plumber and Tetraman design philosophy was stark. Where the plumber vessel emphasized technology and efficiency, the Tetraman bridge showcased strength and martial readiness. Ben Tennyson, Rayona greeted, formal in front of her crew. My warriors await your strategy. We stand ready to face this threat as equals. The last word carried special significance in Tetraman culture, recognition of worthy allies, not just convenient ones. Ben acknowledged it with a respectful nod. The rifts will manifest at these coordinates, he explained, transmitting the data to her vessel. Your ships should establish a perimeter at the designated points. When the breaches occur, you'll need to contain whatever comes through while we deploy the stabilization array. Rayona studied the information, her 4 eyes narrowing thoughtfully. These positions place my vessels at significant risk from Pyros' radiation belts. Yes, Ben admitted, but Tetraman Hool L design can withstand the radiation better than plumber vessels. If there were another way. I did not speak of risk as objection, merely observation, Rayona interrupted, a hint of amusement in her voice. Tetramans do not shy from danger, Ben Tennyson. We embrace worthy challenges. She turned to issue orders to her crew, then looked back to the screen. We will hold the perimeter. See that your array functions as promised. The transmission ended, leaving Ben with a newfound appreciation for Tetraman directness. No false reassurances, no hidden agendas, just clarity of purpose and acceptance of necessary risk. She's impressive, Eunice commented, moving to stand beside him. In my dimension, Rayona was one of our greatest assets, a warrior who understood that sometimes the greatest battles aren't won through strength alone. Ben glanced at her. You worked closely with her. Something flickered across Eunice's expression, a memory, perhaps, or a regret. Yes, we complemented each other's abilities well. Before Ben could inquire further, alarms sounded across the command deck. Breach formation accelerating, Kira called, her fingers flying across controls. First rifts opening in 30 seconds, multiple locations simultaneously. Earlier than predicted, Eunice noted with concern. The Timeless One may be adapting to our countermeasures already. Ben made a split-second decision. Deploy stabilization satellites now. Gwen, prepare the Mana interface. Eunice, I'll need your assistance with the Astral Omnitrix calibrations. He turned to the communications officer. Alert Rayona. Breach timeline advanced. All vessels to defensive positions immediately. The command deck erupted into controlled chaos as orders were relayed and systems activated. Outside the viewports, sleek satellites detached from the plumber vessel, streaking toward predetermined coordinates around Pyros. The Tetraman ships, angular and intimidating by design, moved with surprising grace into formation. First breach detected, announced the sensor officer. Sector 17, near Pyros' outer moon. On the tactical display, a swirling vortex of energy materialized in space, larger than any they'd encountered before. Its edges rippling with colors that hurt the eye to observe directly. Through its center, Ben could glimpse another reality, a version of Pyros where the surface glowed blue rather than orange. Where crystalline structures orbited instead of moons. Second breach forming. Third, fourth. The reports came in rapid succession as rifts tore open throughout the system. Quote, Astral Omnitrix interfacing with stabilization array, Eunice reported, connecting specialized cables between the device on Ben's wrist and the ship's systems. Quantum resonance established. Ben fell. The connection form. Not just to the technology, but to the dimensional fabric itself. Through the Astral Omnitrix, he could sense the rifts like wounds in reality, bleeding energy across the boundaries between worlds. The sensation was overwhelming, almost painful in its intensity. Gwen's voice seemed distant through the flood of sensory input. We need to establish the Mana conduit now. With effort, Ben focused on her voice, anchoring himself in the present moment. Ready. Gwen placed her hands over the Astral Omnitrix, channeling her anodite energy into the device. The sensation hanged immediately. Where before Ben had merely sensed the dimensional breaches, now he could perceive the patterns within them, the mathematical structure of reality itself. It's working, Eunice confirmed, monitoring the connection. The Astral Omnitrix is synchronizing with the rift's quantum frequency. Through the viewports, Ben could see the stabilization satellites positioning themselves around each breach, emitting pulses of energy that matched the rhythm now flowing through the Astral Omnitrix. The rifts responded, their chaotic expansion slowing, edges becoming more defined. Incoming, called the tactical officer. Multiple objects emerging from breaches 3 and 7. The view screen shifted to show crystalline entities pouring from 2 of the rifts, angular beings that seemed composed of living gemstone. Their bodies radiating intense heat as they adjusted to the new dimension. Crystalline pyronites, Eunice identified them. From the alternate pyros we glimpsed. In my dimension, they were peaceful and less threatened. The dimensional transition will disorient them, Ben warned. Rayona's ships need to establish a containment perimeter without engaging unless necessary. On screen, the Tetraman vessels moved into position, deploying energy nets designed to corral rather than harm. The crystalline pyronites responded with confused aggression, hurling shards of the M-selves that exploded against the Tetraman shields. Rifts continuing to multiply, Kira reported, concern edging her voice. The stabilization array is barely keeping pace with formation. We need to close these breaches. Not just contain them. Ben knew she was right. Containment was a temporary measure at best. The rifts needed to be sealed completely before the dimensional strain tore the Pyro's system apart. I need direct interface, he decided, disconnecting from the ship's systems. The Astral Omnitrix can do more than just synchronize with the rifts, it can rewrite their quantum structure. Eunice's eyes widened. You're going to attempt full-dimensional manipulation. That's incredibly dangerous without proper training. In my dimension, Azimuth spent years developing the theoretical framework alone. We don't have years, Ben replied simply, and I learn best by doing. Before anyone could object further, he activated the transformation sequence on the Astral Omnitrix. The Devik, pulsed with energy unlike any transformation before, not just reshaping his physical form, but expanding his consciousness across dimensional planes. Astral way big, Ben's voice resonated with harmonic overtones as he transformed into a being of pure cosmic energy, resembling his Tokastar form but composed of swirling stardust and quantum particles. His body expanded through the ship, not breaking it, but phasing into a state that existed partially outside conventional space. Through the enhanced perception of this new form, Ben could see the dimensional rifts as they truly were, not just tiers in reality, but complex mathematical constructs that connected points across the multiverse. More importantly, he could see how to rewrite those constructs. With thought alone, Ben extended his consciousness through the nearest rift, establishing a connection to its fundamental structure. The experience was disorienting, simultaneously existing in multiple realities, perceiving versions of himself that had made different choices, lived different lives. Incredible, he heard Kira gasp, her voice seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. He's existing across dimensional boundaries simultaneously. Stay focused, Ben. Gwen's voice anchored him. Remember what we're trying to accomplish. Concentrating on her voice, Ben began the delicate process of dimensional manipulation. Through the Astral Omnitrix, he reached into the quantum structure of the rift and began rewriting its parameters, not just closing it, but healing the dimensional boundary itself. The first rift shuddered, its edges beginning to contract. The crystalline pyronites still emerging from it suddenly found themselves being gently but inexorably pushed back toward their home dimension. Some resisted, but the dimensional pressure was irresistible. It's working, Eunice exclaimed. Breach 1 closing at accelerated rate. Emboldened, Ben extended his awareness to the second rift, then the third, establishing connections to each and beginning the same process. With each connection, the strain on his consciousness increased. Maintaining awareness across multiple dimensional planes required concentration beyond anything he'd experienced before. Vital signs fluctuating, Eunice reported, concern evident. His human physiology isn't designed to process this level of dimensional awareness. Ben, you need to scale back, Gwen urged. Close them one at a time. But Ben could see something they couldn't. The rifts weren't isolated phenomena. They were connected on a quantum level, each one influencing the others. Closing them individually would take too long, allowing new rifts to form faster than he could seal them. All connected, he managed to communicate, his voice distorted by the multi-dimensional existence he now experienced. Have to close simultaneously. With tremendous effort, Ben expanded his awareness to encompass all 12 rifts now visible in the Pyro's system. Through the Astral Omnitrix, he established a quantum resonance that synchronized their dimensional frequencies, preparing them for simultaneous closure. The strain was immense. Ben felt his consciousness stretching to its limits, threatening to fragment across realities. Pain lanced through him, not physical, but something more fundamental, as if his very identity was being pulled apart. Through the haze of dimensional overload, Ben became aware of a new presence, a steady, grounding force that somehow reached across the void to find him. 4 strong hands, their touch anchoring him to reality. Ben Tennyson. Ryo. Na's voice cut through the chaos of multi-dimensional perception. Focus on my voice. Find your center. Somehow, the Tetraman ambassador had transported aboard their vessel and physically connected with his transformed state, a feat that should have been impossible given the energy he was channeling. How? Ben managed to ask, his consciousness briefly consolidating. Tetraman warriors trained to center themselves in chaos. She replied, her 4 eyes fixed on his cosmic form with unwavering determination. Your mind is scattered across dimensions. Use my presence as anchor. Ben focused on Rayona's voice, on the steady pressure of her 4 hands against his energy form. Gradually, his awareness consolidated, the overwhelming input from multiple realities becoming manageable. Now complete your task, Rayona commanded. We hold the line here. With renewed focus, Ben channeled energy through the Astral Omnitrix into the network of rifts. The device responded magnificently, translating his intent into precise quantum adjustments. The rifts began to contract in perfect synchronization, their edges folding inward like closing flowers. Dimensional stability increasing across the system, Kira reported, wonder in her voice. All rifts closing at identical rates. The crystalline pyronites and other interdimensional visitors were drawn back to their home realities as the rifts closed. The natural pressure of dimensional separation overcoming their confusion and resistance. Within moments, the vast tiers in reality had contracted to mere points of light, then winked out entirely. Ben released his hold on the astral form, reverting to human with a flash of emerald light. The transition was jarring, from cosmic awareness to limited human perception in an instant. His legs buckle. D's exhaustion hit him like a physical blow. Rayona caught him before he could fall, her 4 arms supporting him with effortless strength. Well fought, she said simply. Ben managed a tired smile. Thanks for the anchor. Without it, I might have lost myself out there. Tetramans understand the importance of remaining grounded, even when reaching for the stars. There was something in her voice. Respect, certainly. But perhaps something more. You faced the void between worlds without flinching. Few would have the courage. Before Ben could respond, Eunice appeared at his other side, concern evident in her expression. The dimensional strain could have torn your consciousness apart, she chided, though her tone carried more worry than anger. Next time, we establish proper protocols BEF. Or attempting multi-dimensional manipulation. Next time. Ben raised an eyebrow, still leaning on Rayona's support. You sound confident there will be one. There will always be a next time with you, Ben Tennyson, Eunice replied. A hint of fondness breaking through her concern. In any dimension, the aftermath of the Pyro's operation brought both triumph and sobering reality. The immediate crisis had been averted, the rifts closed. Dimensional stability restored to the system, but the scale of Kronos' efforts had become clear. Similar breach clusters had been detected in 7 other systems, each requiring intervention before catastrophic dimensional collapse occurred. 2 days later, Ben found himself in the observation lounge of the Celestial Guardian, watching stars streak past as they traveled to the next crisis point. The brief respite from immediate action had given him time to process the enormity of what they faced, and what the Astral Omnitrix had revealed itself capable of. The door hissed open behind him. But Ben didn't turn. He recognized Kira's quick, light footsteps. Thought I might find you here, she said, moving to stand beside him at the viewport. Contemplating the vastness of space and our insignificant place within it. Ben smiled despite himself. Something like that, though after experiencing multiple dimensions simultaneously, vastness takes on new meaning. Kira studied him with the analytical gaze that seemed to miss nothing. You're different since Pyros. More, I don't know. Distant, maybe. Not distant, Ben corrected. Just expanded. He struggled to find words for the experience. When I used Astral way big, I didn't just see other dimensions. I experienced them. Versions of reality where everything was slightly or dramatically different. He looked down at the Astral Omnitrix. Versions of myself that made different choices. Quantum identity theory suggests that consciousness exists across all potential realities simultaneously, Kira offered. Most beings simply can't perceive beyond their own dimensional plane. But the Astral Omnitrix changes that, Ben said quietly. It doesn't just let me transform physically. It expands my perception beyond normal limits. And that expansion comes with knowledge. Knowledge that's troubling you, Kira observed. Ben nodded slowly. I saw what happens if we fail, Kira. Not just theoretically, but actually experienced dimensions where the convergence has already won. Felt worlds dying. He met her gaze. And I saw what happens if we succeed, but at too high a cost. Ra's expression softened with understanding. The burden of foresight. Seeing possibilities doesn't determine outcomes, Ben. Those still depend on choices. Your choices are choices. That's just it, Ben replied. Frustration edging his voice. In every dimension where we stopped the convergence, the cost was. He trailed off, unwilling to voice the visions that haunted him. Significant, Kira suggested. Unacceptable, Ben corrected firmly. They stood in silence for a moment, the starlight casting shifting patterns across their faces. Finally, Kira spoke again, her tone carefully measured. You know, the most brilliant scientists throughout history had something in common. Not intelligence, though that helped, but imagination. The ability to envision solutions that didn't yet exist. She turned fully toward him. If you've seen futures where the cost is too high, don't accept them. Imagine better ones. The simplicity and wisdom of her words struck Ben deeply. Since gaining the Astral Omnitrix, he'd been overwhelmed by the vastness of dimensional awareness, seeing so many possibilities that he'd forgotten his own capacity to create new ones. Thanks, Kira, he said quietly. Sometimes I need reminding that the future isn't fixed, even when I've glimpsed it. That's why you have a team, she replied with a small smile. To remind you of the obvious when you're too busy contemplating the infinite. Their moment of understanding was interrupted by the ship's communication system. Ben Tennyson to the command deck. Priority message from Koros. Ben and Kira exchanged glances. Rayona's homeworld, he noted with concern. The Tetraman ambassador had returned to Koros after the Pyro's mission to brief her government and prepare additional forces. Let's hope it's good news for once, Kira said, though her tone suggested she knew better. The command deck was already occupied when they arrived. Gwen stood at the communications station, her expression grave. Eunice worked at an adjacent console, analyzing data with the rapid precision that characterized her approach to problems. What's happening? Ben asked, moving directly to the central platform. Gwen activated the main view screen, displaying a planetary view of Koros. The Tetraman homeworld looked significantly different from Ben's memories. Massive energy shields now encased major population centers, and vital platforms formed a defensive grid around the planet. Rayona sent an emergency broadcast 10 minutes ago, Gwen explained. Dimensional rifts have begun forming throughout the Koros system, dozens of them, appearing simultaneously with no warning. That's impossible, Kira interjected, moving to check the sensor readings. Our predictive models showed no significant rift activity in that sector for at least another week. The Timeless One is adapting, Eunice said grimly, changing its approach to counter our predictions. It's targeting Koros specifically because of their alliance with us. The tactical implications were clear and concerning. If Chronos could adapt quickly enough to render their predictive model useless, they would be constantly reacting to crises rather than preventing them. Current status? Ben asked, studying the display. Tetraman forces have established defensive positions around the largest rifts, Gwen reported. But they're struggling to contain what's coming through. She enhanced the image, showing massive serpentine creatures emerging from several breaches, creatures composed of what appeared to be living darkness, their bodies absorbing light around them. Void serpents. Eunice identified them, alarm evident in her voice. They feed on dimensional energy. In my reality, they heralded the final stage of convergence in multiple systems. Final stage? Kira questioned. Before complete dimensional collapse, Eunice clarified. They're attracted to weakened reality boundaries, where they accelerate the breakdown process. Their presence means the dimensional fabric around Koros is already critically compromised. Ben processed this information quickly, formulating a response. How long until we can reach Koros at maximum speed? 6 hours, 17 minutes. Gwen answered. But based on the rate of dimensional deterioration, Rayona's forces may not hold that long. Then I go alone, Ben decided. The Astral Omnitrix can create a controlled dimensional portal directly to Koros. Eunice shook her head emphatically. Absolutely not. Creating portals requires precise calculations and enormous energy expenditure. After what happened at Pyros, your system needs time to recover from dimensional strain. Rayona and her people don't have time, Ben countered. And I won't abandon allies who put themselves at risk for our cause. No one's suggesting abandonment, Gwen interjected, her practical nature asserting itself. But rushing in without proper preparation could make things worse. Ben looked at each of them in turn, Gwen with her pragmatic concern, Eunice with her knowledge of dimensional catastrophes, Kira with her analytical mind already calculating alternatives. He saw in their faces not opposition, but the ca. Reful consideration of those who had come to care about both the mission and each other. I understand the risks, he said finally. But I also understand the Astral Omnitrix better now. After Pyros, I can feel the dimensional currents. Sense the paths between realities. He raised his wrist, the device gleaming with inner light. It wants to help, in a way I can't fully explain. Like it has its own awareness of what's at stake. Eunice's expression shifted from concern to intense curiosity. That's consistent with Azimuth's theoretical predictions. The Astral Omnitrix doesn't just transform its user, it evolves with them. Developing a symbiotic relationship that enhances capabilities over time. All the more reason for caution, Gwen pointed out. Symbiotic relationships can overwhelm the host if not properly managed. Or they can create something greater than either part alone, Kira countered, her scientific interest clearly piqued. The question is whether the connection has developed enough to attempt dimensional transportation safely. Ben met Eunice's gaze directly. You've seen what happens when worlds fall to the convergence. If Koros is already at the final stage, every minute matters. We have to try. Eunice held his gaze for a long moment, internal conflict visible in her expression. Finally, she nodded. You're right, but not alone. She stepped forward, placing her hand over the Astral Omnitrix. My Omnitrix physiology is adapted to dimensional transition. I can help stabilize the portal from within. I'm coming too, Kira declared, moving to join them. Quote, you'll need someone who understands the quantum mechanics if things go sideways. And you'll need magical support to counter the Void Serpents, Gwen added, completing their circle. They're vulnerable to focused mana attacks. According to the legerdemain texts I've consulted. Ben looked at the three women surrounding him, their hands forming a connection over the Astral Omnitrix. The device pulsed in response, as if recognizing and approving the combined intent of its wielder and his allies. Together, then, Ben agreed. Eunice, guide me through the portal creation process. Eunice nodded, her expression shifting to focused determination. The Astral Omnitrix needs precise dimensional coordinates. I can provide them directly. She placed her hand more firmly on the device. My Omnitrix core contains the exact quantum signature of Koros from my dimension, similar enough to serve as a beacon for this reality's version. Kira, we'll need a contained space for the portal, Ben directed. Somewhere that can handle dimensional energy fluctuations. Cargo Bay 3 is reinforced for hazardous materials, Kira suggested. And currently empty. I can modify the containment field to accommodate dimensional energies. I'll prepare defensive measures against whatever might follow us through, Gwen added. And alert the ship's command that we're attempting an independent deployment. Ben nodded, feeling a surge of pride in their rapid, coordinated response. Meet in Cargo Bay 3 in 15 minutes. Bring only essential equipment. We travel light and fast. As they dispersed to prepare, Ben remained on the command deck for a moment longer, studying the images of Koros under siege. Somewhere on that embattled planet, Rayona fought to protect her people from a threat they bear. Lee understood, a threat that had followed Ben's team across the stars. We're coming, he promised quietly. Hold the line just a little longer. Cargo Bay 3 had been transformed in remarkably short time. Kira's modifications to the containment systems created a shimmering barrier around the central area where the portal would form. Gwen had established a secondary magical barrier, glowing sigils etched into the floor and walls. Eunice had connected specialized equipment to monitor dimensional energy fluctuations. All three women wore determined expressions as Ben entered, the Astral Omnitrix pulsing with increasingly eager energy on his wrist. Field modifications complete, Kira reported. The containment system is programmed to adapt to dimensional energy signatures as they manifest. Magical countermeasures in place, Gwen added. Any hostile entities attempting to follow through will encounter a very unpleasant surprise. Eunice completed her final equipment check. Portal monitoring systems online. I've established a quantum entangled communication link with the ship. They'll know immediately if our transition succeeds. She looked at Ben. Ready when you are. Ben moved to the center of the prepared area, feeling the converging energies of technology and magic surrounding him. The Astral Omnitrix seemed almost to hum against his skin, resonating with the dimensional potential gathering in the space. All right, he said, raising the device. Eunice, I need those coordinates. Eunice stepped forward, placing both hands over the Astral Omnitrix. Her eyes closed in concentration as she connected with the device on a level beyond physical touch. Transferring quantum signature, she murmured. Dimensional coordinates integrating with Astral Omnitrix matrix. Ben felt the information flow, not as data, but as intuitive understanding. Suddenly, he could sense Koros across the vast distances of space, feel its dimensional resonance like a beacon calling to him. Got it, he confirmed. Initiating portal sequence. The Astral Omnitrix responded immediately, its surface shifting from green to a swirling blue-white as energy built within its core. Ben directed that energy outward, shaping it with the newfound dimensional awareness he had gained at Pyros. A point of light appeared in the air before them, expanding rapidly into a swirling vortex of energy. Unlike the chaotic rifts created by Chronos, this portal formed with elegant precision, its edges stable, its center a perfect window into another location. Through the portal, they could see a Tetraman C. Amon Center. Officers moving with urgent purpose, tactical displays showing battle progress, the red stone architecture distinctive to Koros. Dimensional alignment stable, Eunice reported, monitoring the readings. Portal integrity at 94% and holding. Energy consumption within sustainable parameters, Kira added with barely contained excitement. You've done it, Ben. A controlled interdimensional portal. Gwen moved closer, her hands glowing with prepared magic. I sense no dimensional contamination. The path is clear. Ben felt a mix of triumph and humble amazement. The Astral Omnitrix had responded to his intent with a precision beyond what he'd imagined possible. Creating this portal had felt natural, almost intuitive, despite the incredible complexity of the quantum mechanics involved. Tetramans have noticed us, Gwen observed, nodding toward the portal where several warriors had turned toward the unexpected dimensional window with weapons raised. I'll go first, Ben decided. Establish contact before they decide we're hostile. Without waiting for response, he stepped through the portal, experiencing a brief, disorienting moment of existing in multiple spatial locations simultaneously before emerging into the Tetraman command center. The gravity hit him immediately, heavier than Earth standard, as befitted the powerful four-armed species that evolved there. Ben Tennyson, he announced clearly, raising his hands to show he came in peace. Ally to Koros, I seek Ambassador Rayona. The Tetraman warriors hesitated, their weapons still trained on him and the portal behind. Ben recognized their caution. With dimensional rifts spewing threats across their world, any unexpected portal would naturally be met with suspicion. Before the situation could escalate, a familiar voice rang out across the command center. Lower your weapons. He is expected. Rayona strode into view, her armor scorched and dented from recent battle. A fresh wound crossed her lower right arm, hastily bandaged but still seeping blood. Despite these signs of combat, her bearing remained proud, her four eyes sharp with undiminished determination. Ben Tennyson, she acknowledged, approaching without hesitation. Your arrival is timely. The dimensional incursions grow worse by the hour. Ben nodded, relieved to find her alive and in command. We received your message. My team is ready to assist. He gestured to the portal, where Eunice, Kira, and Gwen waited expectantly. Rayona signaled her warriors to stand down completely. Your allies are welcome on Koros. We face a threat beyond conventional warfare. As the others stepped through the portal, Eunice with practiced ease, Kira with wide-eyed wonder, Gwen with cautious magical senses extended, Rayona directed them toward Allah. RGE tactical display at the center of the command room. The dimensional breaches began 16 hours ago, she explained, highlighting red markers across a planetary map. Initially small, manageable, then these appeared. She indicated larger clusters of breaches, pulsing ominously. The serpent creatures emerged from the larger rifts. Conventional weapons prove ineffective. They simply phase through solid matter when attacked. Void serpents exist partially outside conventional dimensional space, Eunice explained. Their physical form in this reality is only a projection of their true nature. Rayona nodded grimly. So we have discovered through costly experience. 3 major cities have been evacuated, their defensive systems overwhelmed. Ben studied the tactical display, noting the pattern of breaches. Unlike previous incursions they'd encountered, these rifts formed a specific arrangement across the planet's surface, not random, but precisely positioned. They're creating a dimensional lattice, he realized. The knowledge coming partly from his experience at Pyros and partly from the Astral Omnitrix's growing connection to his consciousness. Each rift reinforces the others, creating a self-sustaining network that will eventually envelop the entire planet. Effectively removing Koros from this dimension entirely, Eunice confirmed, her expression darkening. It's what happened to my Earth before the full convergence began. Kira had already connected her equipment to the Tetraman systems, analyzing the data with remarkable speed. The dimensional frequency is shifting constantly, making it impossible to establish a stable countermeasure. It's brilliantly designed, chaotic yet structured. Can the Astral Omnitrix counter it? Rayona asked directly, looking to Ben. Yes, he replied with certainty. But not from here. I need to access the central node of the lattice, the point where all dimensional lines intersect. Gwen had been quiet, her senses extended beyond conventional perception. Now she pointed to a location on the tactical display, a mountain range in Chorus's northern hemisphere. There, the mana currents are being drawn to that point like water down a drain. It must be the central node. Rayona's expression hardened. The Valley of Spirits, sacred ground to my people for generations. Our ancestors believed it connected our world to the realm beyond. They weren't entirely wrong, Eunice commented. Some locations naturally form weak points in the dimensional boundary, places where the veil between realities is thinner. The perfect PLA. CE to establish a central node for a dimensional lattice, Kira added. Kronos didn't choose Koros randomly. Your planet has natural features that facilitate dimensional manipulation. Rayona absorbed this information with remarkable composure. Then we must defend the Valley of Spirits at all costs. My best warriors are already deployed there, but they face overwhelming opposition. Ben made a quick decision. Rayona and I will go directly to the valley. Eunice, Gwen, Kira, coordinate from here. Develop a counter frequency that can disrupt the entire lattice simultaneously. You'll need this, Kira said, handing him a small device. It can map the quantum frequency of the central node and transmit it back to us. Without that data, we can't formulate an effective countermeasure. Ben accepted the device, securing it to his belt. How long will you need once you have the frequency data? 30 minutes, minimum, Kira replied. Possibly longer if the frequency is as complex as I suspect. You'll have to hold the central node that long, Eunice warned. Once Kronos realizes what we're attempting, he'll throw everything at your position. Tetraman warriors know how to hold ground, Rayona stated with quiet intensity. Especially sacred ground. Ben met her determined gaze with matching resolve. We'll hold it together. Something passed between them in that moment, a connect. Ion forged through shared purpose and mutual respect. In Rayona's four-eyed gaze, Ben saw not just a warrior's determination but a deeper understanding of what they faced, the knowledge that some battle must be fought regardless of the odds. Transport to the valley leaves in 5 minutes, Rayona announced, turning to issue orders to her officers. Prepare for dimensional combat protocols. As THE command center erupted into renewed activity, Eunice approached Ben, her expression troubled. Ben, there's something you should know about the Valley of Spirits. What is it? He asked, sensing her concern. In my dimension, it was the first location where Kronos physically manifested, she revealed quietly. Not just as an avatar or projection, but his true form breaching into our reality. The dimensional thinness works both ways. Quote, Ben absorbed this warning, understanding its implications. You think he'll be there personally? I think it's likely, Eunice confirmed. And a direct confer. Ontation with an entity that exists across multiple dimensions simultaneously is exactly what the Astral Omnitrix was designed for. Ben finished, his resolve hardening rather than wavering. If Kronos shows himself, all the better. This ends today. Eunice studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Your confidence isn't misplaced, Ben. Just be careful. In my dimension, we lost our Ben Tennyson in a similar confrontation. The weight of her words settled on him, not as fear, but as sober awareness of the stakes. Across dimensions, versions of himself had faced this threat with varying outcomes. Today, in this reality, he would write his own ending to the story. History isn't destiny, Eunice, he said quietly. Not even dimensional history. She smiled faintly at that. No, it isn't. Perhaps that's why I crossed realities to find you, because this dimension's Ben Tennyson might succeed where mine failed. Their conversation was interrupted by Rayona's approach. Transport ready, she announced. My elite guard awaits us. Ben nodded, turning back to his team one last time. 30 minutes after you receive the frequency data. Not a minute more. Gwen stepped forward, briefly clasping his arm. We'll be ready. Just make sure you're still there when we activate the counter frequency. Count on it, Ben replied with a confidence he mostly felt. As he followed Rayona toward the transport bay, Ben felt the Astral Omnitrix pulse against his wrist, almost like a heartbeat, synchronizing with his own. Whatever awaited in the Valley of Spirits, he would face it not just with allies at his side, but with the accumulated knowledge of countless dimensions within the device that had become more than just a tool. The true test of the Astral Omnitrix, and its wielder, was about to begin. The Valley of Spirits lived up to its name. Mist clung to ancient rock formations that resembled petrified titans, their massive forms creating natural corridors through the mountain range. The air itself seemed charged with energy that raised the hair on Ben's arms and made the Astral Omnitrix pulse with heightened awareness. Rayona's transport had deposited them at the valley's edge, the closest point still secure from dimensional incursion. From there, they proceeded on foot with a squad of 12 elite Tetraman warriors, veterans all, their armor bearing the marks of countless battles. My ancestors believed this valley housed the spirits of all Tetramans who died with honor, Rayona explained as they moved through the mist. A place where the worthy could still witness he struggles of the living and lend strength to their descendants. A thin place, Ben nodded understanding. Where the boundary between life and death, between dimensions, grows permeable. Once, UCH beliefs were considered mere superstition by our scientists, Rayona continued, her four eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Now, we face the consequences of ignoring ancient wisdom. The valley narrowed as they proceeded deeper, the rock formations closing in on either side. Ahead, flashes of unnatural light pulsed through the mist, the unmistakable signature of dimensional rifts. Rayona signaled a halt, gesturing two scouts forward. They moved with remarkable stealth for beings of their size, disappearing into the mist. Moments later, one returned, kneeling before Rayona. The Entral chamber lies 500 meters ahead, the scout reported. At least 30 rifts have formed around it, with more appearing. Void serpents guard the approaches. The forward Tetraman positions have fallen silent. How many serpents? Rayona asked, her expression grim. At least 12 that I could see, the scout replied. Possibly more phasing in and out of perception. Ben activated Kira's scanning device. Its displays confirming what the scout had reported. The dimensional energy is concentrated at the chamber's center. That's our target, the nexus point where all the lattice lines converge. And the most heavily defended position, Rayona noted, not as complaint but as tactical assessment. Ben studied the scanner readings, formulating a strategy. The void serpents are drawn to dimensional energy. If we create a sufficiently powerful distraction, a false dimensional signature, we might draw them away from the central chamber long enough for a small team to reach the nexus. Rayona considered this, then turned to her warriors. Malker, take 6 warriors and the dimensional lures from our equipment cache. Establish positions on the eastern ridge and activate them sequentially. Draw the serpents away from the central approach. A massive Tetraman with battle scars across all 4 arms saluted. It will be done, Commander. Glory to Koros. Glory to Koros, Rayona responded formally, clasping his forearm in warrior's farewell. The unspoken understanding that this might be a one-way mission passed between them without need for words. As Malker and his team moved to execute their assignment, Rayona turned to Ben. "We will advance with the remaining warriors once the serpents are drawn away. You must reach the nexus point and transmit the frequency data while we hold off any remaining threats." Ben nodded, appreciating her direct approach to their dangerous task. "The Astral Omnitrix can create a dimensional shield around us as we approach. It won't last long, but it should get us to the central chamber. My warriors are prepared for dimensional combat," Rayona assured him. Each carries specialized weapons developed since the first incursions began. Ben was impressed by the Tetraman's rapid adaptation to an unprecedented threat. "Your people responded quickly to a completely alien situation. Tetramans respect strength in all its forms," Rayona replied, a hint of pride in her voice, "including the strength to evolve when circumstances demand it." She checked her own weapons, energy blades designed to disrupt dimensional phasing. "Many species underestimate us, seeing only physical prowess without the intelligence behind it. I've never made that mistake," Ben assured her. "Not with any species." Their conversation was interrupted by sudden flashes of light from the eastern ridge, Malker's team activating the dimensional lures. The devices mimic the energy signature of unstable rifts, creating irresistible beacons for the predatory void serpents. Through the mist, Ben caught glimpses of massive serpentine forms undulating toward the false signatures, living darkness moving with disturbing grace, their bodies seeming to bend reality around them. "Now," Rayona commanded, leading their remaining warriors forward. Ben activated the Astral Omnitrix, cycling through forms before selecting one particularly suited to their needs. Going Astral Ghost Freak, the transformation washed over him, reshaping his body into an ethereal version of the ectonorite form. Unlike standard Ghost Freak, this version glowed with cosmic energy, his single eye pulsing with dimensional awareness. Tendrils of ectoplasmic energy extended from his form, capable of interacting with the fabric of reality itself. "Impressive," Rayona commented, clearly appreciating the strategic value of his transformation. "This form exists partially outside conventional space," Ben explained, his voice carrying otherworldly echoes. "I can extend that state to those near me, making us less detectable to beings that sense dimensional disturbances." Rayona signaled her warriors, who moved into tight formation around them. "Lead the way." Ben extended his dimensional phasing field to encompass their entire group, the world around them taking on a ghostly, translucent quality. Through this altered perception, the dimensional rifts ahead appeared as they truly were complex mathematical constructs connecting different points in the multiverse. They moved swiftly through the valley, passing dangerously close to several rifts. Within some, Ben glimpsed alternate versions of Koros, one where the landscape was covered in crystalline growth, another where the sky burned with perpetual lightning, a third where the planet appeared completely abandoned, ancient ruins crumbling in eternal silence. As they approached the central chamber, a massive circular depression surrounded by towering stone formations, the dimensional density increased dramatically. Rifts clustered so closely together that they began to overlap, creating unpredictable zones where reality itself fluctuated between states. "The nexus is just ahead," Ben informed them, sensing the convergence point through his enhanced perception. "But something's different about these rifts. They're not just connecting to alternate dimensions, they're actively drawing them closer together." The convergence Eunice warned of, Rayona realized, beginning here. They reached the edge of the central chamber and paused, taking in the scene before them. At the chamber's center floated a pulsating orb of energy, not chaotic like the rifts, but precisely structured, its surface covered in complex patterns that shifted and rearranged themselves constantly. Surrounding it, a dozen rifts formed a perfect circle, their edges connected by filaments of energy that created a three-dimensional lattice extending outward. Most concerning, however, was the figure that stood before the central orb, a being whose form shifted between solid and translucent, its body composed of what appeared to be fragments of multiple realities fused together. Chronos, or at least an aspect of him, personally overseeing the convergence process. "The Timeless One," Ben whispered. Just as Eunice predicted, Rayona studied the chamber with tactical precision. Two void serpents remained near the nexus. The others have been drawn away as planned. I can handle the serpents, Ben said, evaluating their options. But Chronos is another matter entirely. We need to transmit the frequency data first, that's the priority. Rayona nodded agreement. My warriors will create a perimeter defense while you approach the Nexus. Once the data is transmitted, we withdraw to predetermined positions and await your team's countermeasure. It was a sound plan. But Ben sensed something left unspoken. You don't expect to hold those positions for 30 minutes against reinforcements. Rayona met his gaze steadily. We will hold as long as necessary. A Tetraman warrior asks nothing more than a worthy battle in defense of Koros. Ben respected her too much to offer empty reassurances. Instead, he clasped her forearm in the Tetraman warrior tradition. Then let's make sure your warrior's sacrifice counts for something. At Rayona's signal, her warriors moved into position, specialized weapons ready. Ben extended his dimensional phasing one last time, enveloping them all in momentary concealment as they entered the central chamber. The attack came with coordinated precision. Tetraman warriors emerged from dimensional phasing directly behind the Void Serpents, their weapons striking with perfect timing. Ben dropped his Ghost Freak form, immediately activating a new transformation. Astral Omnitrix, he called as energy surged through him, transforming him into a being of pure cosmic radiation. Like his standard Atomics form but enhanced with dimensional awareness, this version could manipulate not just nuclear energy, but the fundamental forces that bound reality together. The Void Serpents reacted with supernatural speed, their bodies twisting through space in ways that defied conventional physics. One lunged directly for Ben while the other engaged the Tetraman warriors, its massive form phasing in and out of solidity to avoid their attacks. Ha-mi-na ha-mi-na ha-mi-na, Ben chanted, channeling dimensional energy between his hands. Cosmic reality. The blast that erupted from his hands wasn't simple radiation but concentrated dimensional force, energy that affected the serpents on their own extra-dimensional level. The creature recoiled as the blast struck it, its body briefly solidifying completely as the energy disrupted its phasing ability. Rayona seized the opportunity, leaping forward with astonishing speed and driving her energy blades deep into the now solid serpent. The creature convulsed, darkness pouring from its wounds like liquid shadow before it collapsed into nothingness. The second serpent fared no better against the coordinated attack of the Tetraman warriors, whose weapons proved devastatingly effective once the creature's phasing was disrupted by the dimensional energy saturating the chamber. But their momentary victory was short-lived. At the center of the chamber, Chronos turned toward them, his expression betraying neither surprise nor concern, only mild interest. As if observing an unexpected but ultimately inconsequential development. The wielder approaches the Nexus, he observed, his voice resonating with multiple tones simultaneously. As patterns repeat across dimensions. As inevitability asserts itself. Ben moved forward, the scanner device active in his hand. There's nothing inevitable about what you're doing, Chronos. Dimensional convergence isn't cosmic destiny, it's destruction you're choosing to inflict. Perspective limits understanding, Chronos replied, making no move to stop Ben's approach. You perceive from within a single dimension. Despite your new toy's attempts to broaden your view. I've seen enough to know what you're planning, Ben countered, continuing his careful advance. The scanner was already collecting data from the Nexus point, transmitting it back to Kira and Eunice. Just a few moments more and they'd have what they needed. Have you? Chronos tilted his head, studying Ben with genuine curiosity. Has the Astral Omnitrix shown you the final stage? The beauty of complete convergence, when all possibilities exist simultaneously. I've seen worlds dying, Ben replied, his voice hardening. Reality's call. APSING as they're forced together against their natural state. There's no beauty in destruction on that scale. Chronos actually smiled, a disturbing expression on his constantly shifting features. Destruction and creation are merely transitions, Ben Tennyson. The universe you know emerged from chaos. It will return to chaos, and from that chaos, a new order will emerge, one where dimensional boundaries no longer constrain existence. While he spoke, the scanner completed its work, a subtle vibration against Ben's hand signaling that the frequency data had been successfully transmitted. Now the why needed to buy time. 30 minutes for Kira, Eunice, and Gwen to develop a counter-frequency that could disrupt the entire dimensional lattice. If that's true, Ben challenged, why force it? Why no? Allow natural cosmic evolution to take its course. Because some catalysts are necessary, Kronos replied. Some processes require acceleration. He gestured toward the Nexus orb behind him. This reality has grown stagnant, calcified in arbitrary patterns. The convergence renews, revitalizes. At the cost of countless lives, Rayona interjected, stepping forward to stand beside Ben. Bine. GS who never consented to your cosmic experiment. Kronos regarded her with the mild interest one might show an unexpectedly articulate insect. Consent is a concept meaningful only within the narrow confines of individual consciousness. The cosmos neither seeks nor requires permission to evolve. Neither do we, Ben stated flatly, shifting to attack stance. We're stopping this, Kronos. Here and now. For the first time, Kronos' expression showed something beyond detached interest, a flicker of genuine amusement. Many versions of you have made similar declarations, Ben Tennyson. Across countless dimensions, some more impressively than others. He spread his arms, his form growing more substantial. But as I told each of them, you cannot stop a process that exists beyond your dimensional framework. You can only delay it. Without warning, Kronos moved, not through space in any conventional sense, but somehow shifting positions instantaneously, appearing directly before Ben. One moment separated by meters. The next face to face. Observe, he said simply, placing his hand on Ben's Astral Omnitrix before Ben could react. The contact created an immediate resonance, the Omnitrix poo. LSING with energy that surged up Ben's arm and into his consciousness. Suddenly his perception expanded exponentially, not just to nearby dimensions as before, but across the entire multiverse simultaneously. Ben saw everything, infinite variations of reality existing concurrently, each valid, each real, each following its own path through time and possibility. He saw versions of himself in countless forms, some familiar, others unrecognizably different. He saw Gwen, Kira, Eunice, Rayona, and countless others he'd never met but somehow knew. And he saw the convergence, not as Kronos had described it. A beautiful synthesis of all possibilities, but as a cascading collapse that consumed dimension after dimension, reality after reality, leaving not unified existence but empty nothingness in its wake. This is your true goal. Ben gasped, fighting to maintain his sense of self amidst the overwhelming input. Not convergence, complete annihilation. You don't feed on dimensional energy, you feed on dimensional death. Kronos' expression shifted to something like respect. Perceptive, more so than most of your counterparts. He maintained his grip on the Astral Omnitrix, forcing Ben to witness the continuing vision. The Timeless One exists in the spaces between dimensions. As those spaces grow through convergence, so does its domain. With tremendous effort, Ben pulled away from Kronos' touch. Severing the overwhelming vision, he staggered backward, his astral atomics form flickering as his concentration wavered. Rayona caught him with two arms, steadying him while keeping her weapons ready with the others. Ben Tennyson, I'm all right, he managed, regaining his focus. But we need to hold this position at all costs. Kronos isn't just collapsing dimensions, he's feeding the entity that exists between them. Creating more void for it to inhabit. Understanding dawned in Rayona's expression. The Valley of Spirits. Our ancestors sensed the void beyond, the nothingness that hungers. Kronos watched their exchange with the patient indulgence of an adult observing children's play. Your understanding is impressive but ultimately irrelevant. The process has already begun. E-dimensional lattice extends beyond Koros now, connecting to similar nodes across 17 worlds. 17. Ben recalled their intelligence with sudden alarm. The systems where we detected breach clusters. Each a nexus point, Kronos confirmed, each strengthening the others. Even if you somehow disrupt this node, the lattice will simply reform. Ben exchanged glances with Rayona, both recognizing the magnitude of what they faced. This wasn't just about saving Koros anymore, it was about stopping a multiverse-wide collapse already in progress. But they still needed time. Time for Kira, Eunice, and Gwen to develop their countermeasure. Time that Kronos seemed disinclined to grant them. Even if what you say is true, Ben challenged, straightening to his full atomic's height, we start here. One node at a time if necessary. Kronos sighed, an eerily human gesture from such an otherworldly being. Persistence. Admirable but futile. He raised his hands, reality rippling around him. Perhaps a more direct demonstration will convince you of the inevitable. The air split open as dozens of new rifts formed throughout the chamber, each disgorging creatures from across the dimensional spectrum, void serpents, crystalline entities, beings of living flame, and things that defied description entirely. Defend the perimeter. Rayona commanded her warriors, who formed a protective circle without hesitation. Ben assessed their situation with the rapid tactical thinking honed through years of combat. They were vastly outnumbered, facing beings from multiple dimensions simultaneously, with Kronos himself coordinating the assault. "We need more time," he told Rayona. 20 more minutes at least." Rayona nodded once, decision made. "Then time you shall have." She barked orders to her warriors in the Tetraman battle language, short, precise commands that reorganized their formation for maximum defensive capability. Ben focused his energy, preparing for what would likely be one of the most challenging battles of his career. The Astral Omnitrix pulsed against his chest, resonating with the dimensional energies saturating the chamber. "Ha-mi-na, ha-mi-na, ha-mi-na," he chanted, channeling power unlike anything he'd wielded before. Cosmic barrier. Energy erupted from his form, creating a spherical shield that encompassed their entire group. Unlike conventional force fields, this barrier existed across multiple dimensional planes simultaneously, designed to repel beings regardless of which reality they originated from. The interdimensional creatures crashed against the barrier like waves against a cliff, their attacks distorting reality itself where they struck. The shield held, but Ben could feel the immense strain of maintaining it, each impact draining energy directly from his life force through the Astral Omnitrix. Kronos observed with academic interest. "Impressive application of dimensional mechanics. Your connection with the Astral Omnitrix develops rapidly." He made a subtle gesture, and the attacks intensified, coordinating for maximum impact against specific points in the barrier. "But ultimately limited by your human physiology." Ben Kn. Kronos was right. He couldn't maintain the barrier indefinitely. Already he felt his strength waning, the connection between his consciousness and the Astral Omnitrix straining under the pressure. "Rayona," he called, his voice tight with effort. "I can't hold this much longer. When it falls, we fight our way to the chamber entrance." "Fall back positions as planned." "Understood," she acknowledged, preparing her warriors for the coming onslaught. As the seconds stretched into minutes, Ben poured everything he had into maintaining the dimensional shield. Through the Astral Omnitrix, he could sense Kira, Eunice, and Gwen working frantically to develop their countermeasure, their minds racing to translate the frequency data into a workable solution. Just a little longer, he thought, desperate. Lee as his energy reserves approached critical levels. Just a few more minutes. With a sound like reality itself shattering, the barrier finally collapsed. Ben dropped to one knee, his astral atomics foe, flickering as he struggled to maintain it. "Now," Rayona shouted, leading the charge toward the chamber entrance. The Tetraman warriors moved with incredible coordination, their four-armed combat style devastatingly effective even against dimensional threats. They carved a path through the assembled creatures, their specialized weapons disrupting the dimensional phasing abilities that made the entities so dangerous. Ben forced himself back to his feet, channeling what energy he had left into offensive capability rather than defense. Ha-mi-na, ha-mi-na. Cosmic detonation. The blast radiated outward in a controlled wave, temporarily disrupting the dimensional coherence of every entity it touched. The creatures froze momentarily, their forms destabilizing as they struggled to maintain existence in this reality. "Go," Ben urged Rayona and her warriors, creating the opening they needed. They fought their way toward the chamber entrance, each step bought with tremendous effort. 2. Tetraman warriors fell to void serpents that phased through their defenses. Another was pulled screaming into a rift by crystalline tentacles that emerged without warning. Still, they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that retreat meant not just personal defeat but the loss of Koros, perhaps the entire dimension. As they neared the entrance, Ben's communicator activated. Kira's voice came through, breathless with excitement and strain. "Ben, counter-frequency developed. Eunice is calibrating the transmission array now." "How long?" he gasped, blasting another void serpent into dimensional instability. 2 minutes to full deployment, came the response. You need to be at least 50 meters from the nexus point when it activates. The dimensional backlash will be significant. Ben looked back at the nexus orb, where Kronos stood watching their desperate retreat with detached curiosity. Understood. Transmit on my signal. They reached the chamber entrance, the surviving Tetraman. Warriors forming a defensive line to hold back the pursuing entities. Rayona stood beside Ben, her armor damaged, one of her forearms hanging uselessly at her side, but her expression unchanged, determined, focused, unwavering. 50 meters, Ben noted, checking the distance. We're almost there. Ben Tennyson, Kronos called from beside the Nexus orb, his voice carrying effortlessly across the chamber. Even now, you fail to understand the true nature of what you face. The counter-frequency your allies have developed will indeed disrupt this node, temporarily. But the cost. Something in his tone made Ben hesitate. What cost? Quote. Kronos gestured toward the Nexus orb, which had begun pulsing with increased intensity. The dimensional lattice connects 17 worlds. Disrupt one node, and the energy must be redirected. Physics remains consistent even across dimensional boundaries. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transferred. Ben felt a chill of realization. The other nodes will strengthen to compensate. Precisely, Kronos confirmed, including the node forming at Earth. Your home. The revelation hit Ben like a physical blow. Their plan would save Koros at the potential cost of Earth, trading one world for another as the dimensional lattice redistributed its energy. He's lying, Rayona stated flatly, attempting to prevent our counterstrike. Am I? Kronos tilted his head. Ask your Omnitrix ally. She has seen this before, how disrupting one node merely accelerates collapse elsewhere. Ben's communicator crackled. Ben, Eunice's voice came through, tension evident. He's not entirely wrong. The dimensional energy will seek equilibrium. Disrupting the Koros node will temporarily increase strain on the other nodes, including Earth. Ben demanded. Blank, blank. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.